You're on the fresh thing. Appropriate because would
You're just
talking to an empty camera right now. Hey guys, we're recording. I'll actually stop recording for a moment, let people get here.
record the water one?
I did.
Do you have a pen and a piece of paper?
You were getting closer to your truth.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I wasn't really sure what to expect, which is awesome.
That's
for me.
yeah, that's totally fine.
I don't know. Can I take one of these? Can I write on one of these?
Yeah, so those are like kind of handouts that we're gonna use. Actually, we can hand them out now.
Is that
Yeah,
okay?
would you
Yeah,
mind just handing? There's 2 pieces of paper, and feel free, you can use, the open spaces.
Corey tells me he wants to be on the Zoom. Let's see what
So just
Oh, look, there's a pen right here.
okay, 1 sec. Me.
I'm
So
fine.
we're just
Stop.
still kind of starting class, and I'm gonna include a couple people on the people are still arriving. I'm gonna just add a few people to the
That's
Zoom right now.
Awesome. Hi.
See you know Seth.
Invite. Yeah. Hey, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Are you looking for more pens?
Yeah.
Just whatever color.
I can go get.
Especially
bag
fun.
out.
Oh, this one actually doesn't work.
Anyone else, Steph, to include?
I don't remember
There we go.
anyone right off.
Okay.
Sometimes.
Okay.
Some of the classes were overlapping, so.
Yeah.
Did you have a water pen like this too?
There's just the general correspondences, the chart, which is the same. It's all the 5 elements, and then this wood wrap is unique to this class. I'll start my video here. We'll talk about that. We're gonna do something a little different today.
Just up the stairs and then to
Coming
the
in.
left. There are 2 of them.
Upstairs to the
Yeah,
left.
I'll make a little announcement. If anyone needs to use the restroom, just go up the stairs and then to the left, there's one on the right or around the corner in the massage room.
We do.
Harmony's good.
Just 2. We can have one. So,
And there's some water and tea over here if y'all
Oh,
want.
you need both
Something
of
to
them. So
drink.
here's.
are there?
what's that?
Is there another stack of the other ones I only had?
Do we need more?
Here,
Never mind, hang on.
One of those.
one of those.
This one.
And then here's that wood wrap handout.
You have
Where's the
one.
wrap? I think you have.
Uh-oh.
I don't.
Who was in
Oh,
charge of
that's right.
printing? I know who's in charge, because you know we have to print them. Looks like
Okay.
we need one.
Should I go print more of the wrap or is it something?
You
Sure.
can share. I think people can share.
Oh, you
I can.
Did you get, he didn't get.
Steph, should I introduce myself?
Yes.
Want me to just introduce
Yeah.
myself, or you want to do the intro? Steph's been doing the
I want
intro
to hear
like,
you.
every to do the self intro.
Yeah.
A few people are new, so just say a little bit about myself before we get started. My name is Seth Shamon. I'm a licensed acupuncturist and Chinese herbalist, and I've been studying Chinese medicine since 2012. So for about 10 years, practicing for 8 years, and just moved to Utah 2 months ago from Boise. Moved to Boise a year ago from the East Coast, where I had practiced in DC for many years. Moved to Boise to open a clinic there. The clinic went really well. Then I met someone in Utah and decided to sell the clinic and move here. I'm opening up a clinic. Looks like if I sign the lease tomorrow in Pleasant Grove, American Fork, like right on the border, that we would be set to open June 1st. A bit more about my background. I lived and studied in Taiwan and China for a year in 2018, and with Dr. Li Chenyu, one of my teachers, and learned a lot there. I have a lot of teachers here in the United States as well that I won't go so into. But yeah, I've been really lucky in the first 8 years of my practice because I kind of stumbled into a really cool apprenticeship in Washington, DC with a teacher there named Jose Lu Gutierrez. Learned a lot from him, and he had a really busy clinic. And I was very lucky to a lot of the challenge with practice is actually just getting enough of it, right? So I was lucky that when I started out in my practice, I was really busy. Like I was seeing like 100 or 150 patients a week. at that clinic. So anyway, I'm happy to be here. Thank you guys so much for coming. It's like really cool to just be engaging in this way. It's something that I've been teaching. I have been like a professor at 2 universities. That's something Steph usually says too. Trying to do as good of a job as she does with the intro. But I have been an instructor at Virginia University of Integrative Medicine and Maryland University of Integrative Health, which is where I went to school. But yeah, so I do have experience teaching, but I really enjoy teaching with people who are not Chinese medicine people, just people who have an interest in learning, and it's been cool to, over the past couple of months, just sort of introduce some concepts about Chinese medicine and just chat. And so this is part 2 of a 5-part installment of the 5 elements of Chinese medicine. And as I said in the intro, we had an intro class to the 5 elements as a whole. One thing is that the word elements is not really probably the best word choice. Often it says on the sheet there 5 phase correspondences, 5 phases. Because like when we think elements, it kind of thinks of like we can think of like sort of a substance or a kind of more dead substance, but it's more of like phases or frequencies in a way. 5 frequencies or 5 phases of life, or phases of nature, or phases of the day, or phases of seasons. We can kind of look at many different levels, and within all those different views, right, like the cycle of life, the cycle of the seasons, the cycle of the day, we could look at all these different cycles and we can break it up into 5. We could break it up into 2, which is what we did the first class where we talked about yin yang, right? If we break the world into 2, this is breaking the world into 5 frequencies. So we have the 5 elements, right? So the 5 elements of Chinese medicine, and I use the term elements, even though it's not the best, but just because it's common usage. So I'll say elements or phases. 5 elements. This is a very precarious balance here. It might fall. So we have the 5 elements of Chinese medicine, which is a water element, wood element, fire element, earth element, and metal element. So different than like the 4 elements that we think of in Native American traditions, or the elements in the Ayurvedic tradition where we have air and ether. So some people are like, oh, where is air? What about air? Because that's an element that we're used to thinking about, but air is in there actually. You have to just understand this system of 5 elements, and we'll kind of talk about today how air is sort of associated with the wood element, also can be associated with the metal element. It's incorporated. It's a comprehensive system, believe me. And so it's better to sort of just, when you're learning one particular system, any tradition, any system, you kind of want to try to like learn it with beginner's mind, or just kind of like don't really introduce all these other things, right? When you're learning one thing, you just want to like learn that. And then later, once you have a grasp of this system, then you can kind of compare it to like Ayurvedic system, or to Native American, element system, or to different other systems of belief or systems of organizing the world. So this is the 5 element system. So last time, and these elements interact with each other. A really helpful way that we think about it a lot, which like I said, like we can look at it through different cycles of life. We can look at it through the cycle of life from the great mystery to birth, to maturation, to decline, to death, right? We could look at it in that way. One really common way that we look at it also is with the seasons, the cycle of the seasons. Even though there's only 4 seasons, right? Only 4 seasons, but we have 5 elements. The earth element being related to the transitional time between seasons, and earth element also specifically being related also to like this 5th season of late summer. It's associated with the late summer also, which is where we have heat plus humidity in between fire and metal, or in between summer and fall. So these 5 elements or 5 phases, they're not elements because they interact with each other in a really profound and really predictive way, right? It's like this is the law of nature, that after the winter comes the spring, right? After the spring comes the summer. After the summer comes the fall. After the fall comes the winter, right? Just like the cycle of the day. It's like the same. It's predictive. So when you understand these cycles of nature, we can understand a lot about how things work. And so as without, so within. So when we look at nature, describing nature in all of these ways, we can also use the same understanding of the cycles of nature to understand the human, because we are nature. We're the same. We have the same cycles. So we have these same energies within ourselves, the energy of the springtime, the energy of the summer, the energy of the fall, etc. And so as we're going through these classes, we're fleshing out in more detail what does it mean to be that cycle of the springtime energy, or that wood element. What does that mean? How does that show up within ourselves? How is it showing up well? How is it not showing up well? Right? How is the fire element showing up well? How is it not showing up well? To allow us to move fluidly through life, to embrace all of these cycles of nature, right? And so we may get to, so as we're going through these 5 elements, we're kind of experiencing our own, psycho-emotional, spiritual relationship with all the cycles of nature. So as we get to one element or one phase, and you're hearing this and you're like, I'm like, I don't do that, or like, I can't do that, or I do that really well, or these are the ways that I do it well, these are the ways I don't do it well. That's how we can heal. That's how we can heal ourselves and how we can grow as individuals. And so for each of these 5 elements, we can look at these through the lens of moving from the emotion to the virtue. So from the emotion of that element to the virtue, this is something that we've looked at as an overview for all of the elements, and then also more in depth with the water element. So with the water element, moving from the emotion of fear into the virtue of wisdom or faith. Wisdom or faith. I'll sit down. Adjust this a little bit. People on the Zoom were just looking at like my midsection, but it's like hard to have a view that accommodates both. But so we looked at that water element, which was associated with the winter time. It was associated with the gathering of potential energy of the winter. It's the most yin element. Everything goes internal. Associated with the direction of the north. It's associated with cold. It's associated with the kidneys and bladder. And so it's associated with this wintertime, this kind of storage capacity, receptivity, that then, as we move into spring, bursts forward into the wood element. So this transition from the water element into the wood is one of moving from potential into kinetic energy. And so we're going to look at that kinetic energy today. But as we understand, it's important to understand the relationship between the 2 elements. So we learned about water, which is the mother-child, love mother-child, it's called sometimes, this generative cycle, right? We have this generative cycle where the water element generates wood. This is the law of nature. So if we have a poor water element or a weak water element, we will actually have a weak wood element, because that's where it derives its nourishment, right? If we have imagine like an absentee mother, right? Like they're not feeding their child, you're gonna have a malnourished child, right? If the mother, and we could say mother, we could say father too, but it's specifically using mother because there is this, association of nourishment, right? Of giving nourishment, right? From herself, right? From the breast originally. So that concept of nourishment is important and is intentional. So the law of mother-child. So the water element nourishes the wood elements. So if we have a deficient water, we will have a deficient wood as well. This becomes very practical because, like, if you don't do rest, if you don't do restoration, if you don't do stillness, you can't really do movement that well. Wood is about movement, right? So we kind of want to have movement all the time. We want to always have activity, and we don't really want to have stillness. So then that activity can be not really rooted and can be either very rigid or either very weak. And we'll look at how the wood element shows up either in excess or deficiency, or it can be both at the same time often as well. Some areas where we're, really excessive or rigid, and some areas where we're very timid and weak. So we'll understand that more, but just to point out the relationship between the water and the wood. And then as we're talking about it, we have as we're saying, the generative cycle, the sheng cycle in Chinese, and the law of mother-child. And then we also have the relationship called the control cycle. Okay, so the metal element controls the wood element by like pruning, cutting down. Metal element cutting down the wood, right? Because if we just have so much growth in all directions, we actually won't have a good, solid, fruitful yield in our growth. So metal controls wood by pruning. And so that can be over controlled, right? Where we're pruning so much, cutting everything down, there's no growth, right? Or that can be under controlling, where there's no pruning, and then we have so much growth, but it's not directed growth. So those are kind of some of the relationships. And then as you know, wood generates summer. So wood generates fire, rather, spring generates summer. Any questions lingering from last week or from the 5 elements in general?
Question,
Yes.
could you repeat the virtue of
Mhm.
water?
So the virtue of water is sometimes said as faith, sometimes as wisdom, whereas the fear being the out of balance emotion. And so it's moving from fear to faith or fear to wisdom.
Mhm, thank you.
And how does fire feed?
Yes, fire feeds earth. So just like
Ash is good.
I see. So like thinking of a physical
I'm just trying
kind of metaphor.
The metaphor.
Yeah. So I mean, I mean, maybe some gardeners can say this in more detail, but you know, like carbon doesn't carbon feed soil, right? Soil quality. I don't know. That's the strongest metaphor.
Forest
But
fires.
forest fires generate the earth.
They take out the muck and then it's cleansing and then allows it.
But you know, really helpful, kind of the way that we think about it more often is that we can look at kind of the cycle of growth, like from a seed to a tree. We can say, for example, whereas the water element represents the seed potential energy. Once that seed springs forth, the sprout representing the wood, and then this upward growth. And then as it's reaching, you know, kind of like maturation is the associated with the fire element. This is looking at the cycle of life in a way as well. And then as we reach that fullness, total fullness, or like where it's gather all that energy, and then we kind of like reap the benefit of that. This is like the harvest time, or the element associated with the harvest time, when we actually harvest and enjoy this, you know, the sweetness and bounty of life. That's the earth element. And then, you know, and then the letting go, or the death phase, or the, you know, shedding of the leaves is associated with the metal element. And then that, you know, eventually going into death, and then that cycle restarts again. So water, in a way, being associated with death and life. Sometimes water associated with old age, but also associated with sort of infancy or prenatal times. But this is kind of the mystery. So this is associated with birth, wood, and this is associated with death, or letting go, metal. Right? Okay.
So one question about fire. In the chart here, the emotion listed is joy. But most of the emotions for the other ones are acquired emotion, you know, a negative emotion. So why is fire joy? Like, what's the down?
Yeah, so we'll look at that in more detail next week. But you know, so joy, we usually think that's like a really positive thing. We could like also kind of easily put the emotion like a mania in a sense, but it's the feeling of like scattered, excessive joy, right? Like manic, excessive activity, right? Because fire is about activity, it is about fun, you know, it is about joy, but it's like this kind of rooted joy of the heart, like you being in one's heart. And when that's not rooted and it's scattered, that's actually where we have that emotion of joy. In English is a little weird because joy is a quote unquote good thing, but when we have excessive or not rooted, kind of manic, or sort of, yeah, like more like manic, and then it could also manifest as a lack of joy as well. More specifically with that I mean, all of these emotions can be excess or can be deficient, because we can have lack of anger, which we'll look at, which often is actually anger. Well, usually, I mean, the anger one is an interesting one, because a lot of times, like if you ask, I feel like if you ask like 4 out of 5 people, do you get angry? They'll say, no, I don't get angry. But they do get angry. They get frustrated. If you say, do you get frustrated? They'll say yes. But that's the same emotion, actually. Just one is expressed and one is not expressed.
So those
right?
immediately say I'm filled with rage.
That's anger. Yeah, that's rage. Yeah,
all right.
that's anger. That's wood element.
I had a friend.
Yeah, so this is a good class for your friend to be in. Yeah, everyone is a liar too. But like we'll see, yeah, we'll see, how with the emotion of anger specifically, I mean, there's a certain way in which it's like very uncomfortable. I mean, all the emotions are sort of uncomfortable, but we'll look more in detail. But I've just noticed this, like if I'm trying to gauge the status of a person's wood element, for example, and I ask like, do you get angry? If they say no, that's probably even more of an indication that their wood element is out of
When someone
balance,
says,
right?
I'm fine.
I'm fine. Like, yeah, no, I don't get angry. I don't get angry because we'll get more into this. It's suppressed, yeah. So yeah. So the movement in the wood element is from anger to benevolence. So we'll look into like how are those things related, or what does that even mean? What does benevolence mean? We'll look into that. But we're gonna do something a little bit untraditional here, and probably will never happen again. But okay, so you have in your hands this wood wrap, it's called. So essentially, a little backstory here. This was written in 2014 by my ex-wife, and she wrote this. She was 2 years behind me, sort of in my wood wrap. Yeah, that one. Yeah, so there's 2 pages. So basically, when she was in school, like in her first semester of acupuncture school, for a particular assignment she was presenting about the wood element, she decided to write a wrap. And then she wrote something that really was very creative and really interesting, but had no like flow really at all. It wasn't a rap. So she gave it to me, and then I redid it because I'm very into rap music. Many of you may not know that, but I'm into rap music. And so I kind of rewrote it, and then and so basically everything you need to know about the wood element, I'm going to do it. Yes. So basically everything you need to know about the wood element, really, and most things, is actually in this wrap, pretty much. So
I love this. We're ready.
You get a beatbox going?
I'm going to get a beat. Yes, I have a beat. So yeah, so we'll kind of go into the lyrics, analyze it after. I'm a little nervous, and I literally just looked at this for the first time, and this is 2014, 8 years ago. So yeah, I'm a little rusty. Stuff might come up. I might get emotional. I might cry. I might yell.
Who are you? You changed so much in like 8 weeks.
Okay, so we're gonna throw on this beat. Let me do a sound check. So nervous.
This is fun.
It is fun. Thank you guys for coming out. Okay. I'm going to. Listen up, y'all. I'm gonna tell you a story about a little lady that has so much glory. It's the glory after winter, and those memento memories, that cold, dark fear, real life, scary stories. Out of the darkness comes light, springing from deep down. Just one young lady beneath the thick yin mounds. She is shooting up. Trees grow tall and high. Like Granny's cherry tree, sour cherry pie. This energy is in me. I let my hair down. Let the wind blow through, because I'm flexible and strong. Look into my eyes. I don't mean to shout. I just know what is what and what life's about. It's about growth and vision and blazing new trails. Some sipping whiskey sour and a spliff to inhale. If all trash is in my path, I'll never get stuck. Let's move and pays off. Nothing to do with luck. You schmuck. You're trying to stop my flow. Go incredible. Hulk. Unleash this anger. Look out, folks. But Bruce Banner was a good guy, right? As benevolent a man as the dude was bright. Eyes set full speed on some scientific sites. Yet try as he might, emotionally not right. Feelings buried deep down, bottled up too tight. Emotional stagnation, body-wide inflammation, this societal creation is some shit we all be facing. Us rat facing hidden release via tears. Let it flow, let it move, never stop changing gears. The good news about Bruce, he doesn't have to be you. Emotions flow and move like the Hulk sinews. Lose the two, temper. From my metal paths, 6 young lines. Which hexagram is that? Action will be birthed from receptivity. Strategies birthed from deep inside of me. They live in my liver and thrive in the spring. While you working through the winter, I cultivate my lane. The liver wears the hard hat. The planner, after all, bursts through the ground, fist pound through the wall. So get me some scissors and some old magazines. The all-night vision board in this infancy. Some of those lines are kind of cheesy. I didn't write the cheesy ones. I only wrote the good ones. when I'm sitting at the cafe, choices be teeny, minutes on end, club sandwich or linguine, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, go, gallbladder, make decisions, take chances, and climb your own ladder. Step into my hum, that's a different kind of fun. Dream, wonder, birth, my creative life begun. Birth the spirit, gave with each night's new dream. Stream and shout my mission loud, manifest. Manifest. The future holds 10,000 possibilities. Peace with the process, no fear in the least. Each of these days, the sun will rise in the east, and one of these days will be a different kind of beast. So with all of these phases, we keep our peace. That's it. Thank you guys for coming out. You know, you had a lot of places you could be tonight, and you chose to be here with me, and that really means a lot.
That's why it came.
If anyone wants to go now, I won't be offended. It's okay. You know,
Will you show us your Hulk side a little bit later?
the Hulk side, yeah. So
When do we ask for encores right now?
I could do my own raps too, maybe after class. It actually is deep. It actually is deep. And so like, it's kind of interesting. A lot of things we can analyze here, but one is this figure of the Incredible Hulk, Bruce Banner. So with this story of the Incredible Hulk, Bruce Banner being sort of like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of scenario, right? Where Bruce Banner is this very upright, studious scientist, right? And he never experiences anger, but he does have anger. He just never expresses it. And so then he turns into the Incredible Hulk, which is this, you know, absolute destructive kind of anger, excessive anger scenario. Also green, the color of the wood elements. So Bruce Banner, you know, that's kind of the issue with suppression, right? Because you create sort of an Incredible Hulk within yourself, and that can kind of express itself. In Chinese medicine, we have actually a formula for this, sort of Incredible Hulk formula, we could say. But a formula for this called, that I've referenced a couple of times, I think in class, but in Chinese called Xiao Yao San, or is called sometimes Free and Easy Wanderer, or sometimes called Rambling Powder, or Free and Easy Wanderer. This Xiao Yao San is used for like a person who's an angry doormat person, right? Angry doormat person, like everyone's walking all over them and they feel so angry, but they never say anything, right? That's angry doormat. And so, but then you know, modification of this called Jia Wei Xiao Yao San, where over time, that level of stagnation of qi stagnation, liver qi stagnation, can generate heat, kind of like generate friction, right? If you think of like things are stuck, that can generate heat or friction. And now we have this element of what we call, so this is for liver qi stagnation. And we don't know what that means exactly yet. We might get into it a little later today. But then we have this, which is liver qi stagnation that generates heat, which is what we call depressive heat. By the way, the word depression in Chinese, there's a term for depression, which often is correlated to this kind of frustration, this kind of like stuckness, depressive heat. So this is for depressive heat. So this scenario is where we have the angry doormat that intermittently goes postal, right? Like where they have all this anger that's buried within, and then often there can be heat signs, right? They might have red face or other signs of heat that every once in a while they could explode. Like you don't really know when. It comes out of nowhere because like this person never expresses anger. That's kind of the problem. And then they can explode. That's the angry doormat that intermittently goes postal. That's more of like a Incredible Hulk scenario. So that's the depressive heat element, the Jia Wei Xiao Yao San, or the rambling powder with other flavors. Okay, and so the first kind of stanza, you know, with It's the Glory After Winter, this is referencing the Sheng cycle, that the water element comes first, and those scary stories, that cold, dark fear, right? The water element being associated with fear, right? And then out of the darkness comes light. This is a law of nature, right? Out of the darkness comes light, and that moment of like sunrise, for example, that's the wood, that's the beginning, that's the birth of yang, right? Just like the springtime energy with the birth of yang out of yin, just one yang line beneath the thick yin mountain. This is actually, this is referencing the hexagrams or the I Ching, which actually an error that we chose to keep in the wrap at the end because it just sounded good. But the trigram associated with the wind, which is what's associated with the wood element, is actually a one yin line beneath two yang lines. This signifies wind. So that's kind of a mistake, but it's a mistake that's intentional just because it sounds good. Like one yang line breaking through the yin. So we can think of it as like one yang line that's breaking through the yin. And qi is shooting up. This is signifying the upward movement of wood. Wood is about upward movement, growing tall and high. And then the sour flavor of the sour cherry. It's kind of a cheesy line, but the sour flavor is associated with the wood. Sour flavor associated with the wood and the liver. In a way, by the way, the flavors sort of like kind of control, in a way, kind of like balance the energetic nature. So like the energetic nature of wood is up and out. Sour actually astringes. So that astringing can kind of like sort of harmonize the wood elements. Just like bitter being associated with the fire, but the bitter drains things down. Fire is out and everywhere, and bitter drains things down. So the flavors actually sort of have a harmonizing effect on the elements, or a regulating effect, really. So this energy is in me. I let my hair down long. This is kind of referencing a portion of the a text, the Yellow Emperor's classic of Chinese medicine, where it says, in the spring you let your hair down. You let your hair down and walk through the veranda, walk through the courtyard. So this kind of also representing, like, versus keeping your hair, tight, contain potential energy, you can let it flow, kinetic energy. The wind being associated also with the wood element, as I said, flexibility and strength. This is a theme of the wood element, being strong and flexible at the same time, which can be challenging, right? Not being too rigid, but not being too weak at the same time. Flexible and strong. Liver opens up into the eyes and can manifest in a shout. Doesn't mean they're shouting, yelling at the top of their lungs, but kind of like I'm talking, like very kind of direct and staccato, sort of like that directed. Like, like can imagine like a mom who's like not angry with their child, but like wants to communicate something that's very important. She could be doing that in a whisper. She could be saying, that's a shout too. That directed kind of thing, right? That's a shout, even though it's not about the audible decibel level. It's about the sort of directed nature and the upward movement and the very direct, right? I know what is what and what life's about. It's about growth and vision being associated, both physical vision, right? Liver manifests in the eyes, but also vision for your life. And blazing new trails. This is representative of the wood element, creating new things, benevolence, actually being able to see a new way, a new perspective. Some sipping whiskey sour and a spliff to inhale. So referencing alcohol and marijuana. We'll kind of look into a little bit of like what those two substances, how they impact the wood element, actually. Again, the flavor sour. If old trash is in my path, I'll never get stuck. So this is the growth of wood despite anything in your way, navigating around obstacles. Flexible movement pays off, nothing to do with luck. Is this intentional cultivation? And then referencing Incredible Hulk, unleashing this anger. Then we went into the Bruce Banner thing. He was had this vision on scientific, advancement, but he had this emotional imbalance, anger, suppressed, feelings buried deep down, bottled up too tight. This will manifest as illness, buried feelings, in this case, anger. And then emotional stagnation of qi associated with the wood element. Liver is responsible for the smooth flow of qi. That emotional stagnation can create inflammation, right? Like this stagnation generating heat, friction. Release via tears, kind of like reminiscent of the acupuncture point gallbladder 41 on the foot, which is called head above tears, which is this sort of like release of pent-up emotion or pent-up anger. Sometimes you can be so angry that you cry actually out of anger. You can cry out of anger. That's that acupuncture point gallbladder 41. Let it move, let it flow, never stop changing gears, right? Referencing change, movement, all about the wood element. And so like I said, everything is in here. Everything's in the wood wrap. We can analyze every single line. Grandma metal. So the grandmother of this law of the 5 elements. Again, the law of mother-child, right? Because metal, the white circle, I knew that was going to happen. It's like, I can't even explain how precarious it was balancing there. That's okay. I'll just hold it up for now. So just like we said, this is the mother of wood, metal being the mother of water. So this is the grandmother. So this control cycle can be the grandmother, grandchild. So it's okay. There's no, oh yeah, that. Thank you. Yeah. So anyways, so as we said, the grandmother metal controls wood. So that's kind of referencing that control cycle. See if that'll balance there. Liver associated with the spring. Action will be birthed from receptivity. Again, the water element, receptivity, generates in its proper time action, wood. Strategy is birthed from deep inside of me. Liver is responsible for strategizing. The liver is said to be the general. At this time in Chinese history, when a lot of these texts were being written, was the Han Dynasty in the year 200 AD, which was a time of kind of like organization of the government. Bureaucracy, everything had its place. It was very organized society, and so they used a lot of times like metaphors of governance when they were talking about the organs of the body. So they're like, your body's like a kingdom, and each organ sort of has its role in that kingdom. And so the liver was the general, the commander of the armed forces, mobilized troops into action, and that general needs vision, needs clear vision. While you're working through the winter, I'm cultivating my ling meaning spirit, and it's kind of this creative spirit within ourselves. So if you're working through the winter, you can't really have very strong growth. If you're storing your energy in the winter and generating a lot of this potential energy, and we don't have to do it in the winter, winter is one season, but also like if you're doing this kind of storage capacity, resting, meditating, sleeping, all these receptivity, stillness things, then you'll have better action. We don't get this as a society. We don't get this. Like we think we just always keep acting and that you'll have better action. But actually, if you have rest, you'll have better action, right? Yeah, get me some scissors and some old magazines. This was not my line. We all night vision boarding the same fantasy. Kind of funny. So there's a vision boarding, very like, I don't know if you guys know what vision boarding is, but very wood activity. Like you basically, take some old magazines and cut up things and you create, okay, how do I want to envision my career in 2 years? So let me get all these images that represent this vision, and then you put that, and then you paste them all together like sort of in a collage, and that's a vision board, a very wood element activity. Channeling this internal vision, making it external. And then this cafe scenario with the deciding between club sandwich or linguine, this is pointing to the decisiveness factor, liver and gallbladder specifically, of kind of making decisions sort of in the external world, actually navigating through the world and making all these decisions. In Chinese, literally, if you say someone has a weak gallbladder, that means they can make decisions. We actually have independently this like idea in the West of like you have a lot of gall, or we don't really say weak gall, but there's this association with the gallbladder with sort of strength. And a weak gallbladder would be a really timid person who can't make any decisions, right? If excess gallbladder, you're making so many decisions, kind of that would be like you have a lot of gall, like you don't really know your place, kind of thing. And then the Hun, it's interesting, yeah. So and then the Hun, being the spirit associated with the wood element, which is associated with, it's translated as the ethereal soul, is kind of like the vision again, but on a grander scale. So the Hun is what is responsible in Chinese thinking for our dreams. This is visioning, dreaming. At night when we sleep, the Hun travels. This ethereal soul travels and sort of connects, the Hun also has this association of sort of like the collective consciousness in a way, collective dream consciousness. That would be the Hun. And it also can show up in our own life of like our vision of our destiny for our life. birth. Birth being associated with wood, as we said earlier. Again, shout. The sun will rise in the east. That's the element of the wood, the rising sun. Birth of yang.
Can you say that one more time?
So the east, the sun will rise in the east. This is referencing the east is the direction associated with wood. Rising sun. Sun rises in the east. Kind of this yang coming out of darkness. That's a wood element. Yeah, east direction is associated with the wood. So yeah, that's the wood wrap. So that's the class. I'm just kidding. I'm going to go into more detail about a couple of things, but that does kind of contain a lot of things. Any questions so far?
I have a million questions. I just don't.
Yeah,
Right.
you can ask one for now, and if there's more later, you can ask.
Maybe to wait.
Sure. Yeah, it might be answered, and yeah.
So for wood,
Mhm.
oh, I'm sorry, were you gonna ask a question?
No, she's
No, go
thinking
ahead,
still.
go
Yeah.
ahead.
So for all these different things, there's like physical
Mm-hmm.
characteristics.
Hmm.
So I think you mentioned, like kind of lanky, sinewy.
Hmm.
But when you're trying to figure out, kind of where somebody's coming from, how would you
Do that.
kind of, yeah. how
Yeah,
would you
good question.
kind of-
Like behaviorally?
Yes.
Yeah, behaviorally, just character-wise.
So a classical 5-element acupuncturist would have one simple answer to this.
Feel or pulse.
Actually, not the pulse. It's a very good guess. The pulse and tongue, those are some of the main diagnostics that we use. But in 5-element, we actually use what we call the CSOE, which we diagnose based on the color, sound, odor, and emotion. Because each of these elements is like a frequency. And so that frequency will show up in sort of everything that they do. And so the color associated with the wood is a green, or kind of actually blue-green. In Chinese, the word qing kind of means like blue-green, bluish-green, but more green. Sound being a shout, odor being rancid, emotion being anger. And so if someone is a wood element, especially if they're out of balance, it's a little bit harder to tell if they're very in balance. They're moving fluidly through all of these 5 elements. But if the more out of balance they are, the easier it is to tell actually through the CSOE, color, sound, odor, emotion. Green is like, oh, someone's green. It's more of a hue, actually. It's more of a hue that you can sort of see around here. And then shout, like I mentioned before, kind of like this sort of staccato upward way. They could also manifest as a lack of shout if they're very deficient wood. But shout, color would be rancid, like rancid oil. Should we smell the color? I mean, this is what I say color, the odor. We smell that on like usually the back of the neck, kind of weird. I don't usually, ask them if I can smell, but you can kind of smell in the room, like what they leave behind. It's a tricky one too, because a lot of people cover up their smell, with a lot of perfumes and deodorant, and even shampoo can make it hard, all these things. And then the emotion of anger. So this is the way. But then we also have this element of like the constitutional type, like what is the body type? That's a little bit less reliable. But in general, the wood body type would be more like kind of tall, lanky, sinewy. If you look at the hands, how the hands are different for each element. I sort of have this kind of like a little bit knobby, like sort of knobby knuckles. Associated with the wood, this kind of like gnarled, like bamboo, knobs. I don't know what they're called on bamboo. These ridges, these notches. And then, the pulse, if they're out of balance, again, the pulse will be in general more wiry, reflecting that stagnation of qi. But it depends, because they could also be more deficient, or like blood deficient. And if they're a blood deficient type, there would be more thin pulse. Yeah. Okay, so let's get moving. We might have more questions come up, but let's try to get through some of this stuff. So the movement of wood, again, the movement of wood is the upward movement, springing up and surging forth and spreading out and circulating.
That's in positives. Because like those seemed like
This is kind of out of balance. This is more out of balance. I mean, but in a way, there can be a healthy expression of all of these things as well. But yeah, like I said, with this CSOE, color, sound, odor, emotion, they show up more readily if a person is out of balance, if a person is out of balance and unhealthy. these things will show up more so. They might show up if someone's healthy, but just more subtly.
So like the rancid.
Yeah.
You have said that before, like almost like an oil.
Yeah, like rancid oil.
Rancid oil.
Yeah,
Is
My
it like,
ex-husband smelled like
really. Anger issues.
that. Yeah, and it's not Peter in a lighter. He's a lighter.
Uh-huh. Well,
Like deeply. They stunk all the time.
Really?
Your smell.
yeah, I mean, if something smells really bad, it's usually a sign of that something's off.
Like coal and oil and dirt.
So coal would be more a fire element, you know, if it's
Really?
like scorch is fire.
No, it's
Um,
different.
Well, we don't have them here, but
Yeah,
He
bring it
does
out, bring it out.
still smell the same.
Yeah, you come to the next class.
Yes, he does still smell the same. Sorry.
yeah,
But
no,
not
it's
really.
funny. Yeah.
We're like,
Reference point.
how's it go?
Yeah. Can we-
Yeah.
No, we already smell. You don't even have to.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Maybe
Yeah.
it's like improved, got more balance, you know.
We smell each other.
Maybe, yes.
We've done that before.
I'm a
It's
sniffer.
like I said,
I am a total sniffer.
It is tough because it's like I mean, like you have to really find it. You have to be able to get underneath the artificial smells, you know, because it's like I don't think anyone probably in this room like has you know, even if like if you use shampoo is scented, you know, lotion, like
No deodorant.
deodorant, laundry detergent, like all of these things have a smell. Essential oils. Exactly. So it's hard. It's sometimes hard with the smell. It's like, oh, this is fragrant. This is sweet. It's their shampoo that's fragrant, like not their skin.
How did you hone your skills?
I
through
mean,
all of that?
this one is the least reliable. I naturally have a good good sense of smell. I do. No, I'm not. I mean, I'm not good at all of these, but odor I like. I have little two cents. I mean, it's a curse as well as a blessing to have a
Oh,
good
yeah.
sense of
It's
smell.
like awareness.
Yeah, and it's like I hate this. Like I can't even be around this artificial smell, something like that. Anyway, getting off track, but interesting stuff. Yeah, with the smell. No, it's okay. Okay, so we talked about the movement of wood being upward and out. In relationship between the water and the fire, or the kidneys and the heart. Because I know some of you are qigong people, right? The relationship between the jing and shen. This is something that is the heart kidney axis, or this relationship between our essence and our spirit, our jing and our shen. Well, it's actually the wood element. It's the liver in a certain way that actually mediates this relationship. Look, I mean, the liver is literally between water and fire, and it's the upward movement. So this wood element actually lifts the energy out of water into fire, or out of kidneys into the heart.
Because it's filtration.
Let's not think of it like that. Kind of. I mean, kind of. Yeah, we'll get into that function as well. But just energetically, more energetically, like, you know, just it's this upward movement, you know, from water into fire, or from kidneys. And there's a physiological association also. But for now, just energetically, just like you know, wood, rising energy.
I've got a question.
Sure.
Just if you're living in a cycles of the elements
Mhm.
in your life, and your daily routine should be like that, your like yearly, and so what sort of things?
Yeah.
What would that look like?
Good question. Well, first you have to understand what each cycle of life means. I mean, we have on some level genetically, intuitively, an understanding of this, but we're kind of pretty divorced from the cycles of nature that we need to, like, you know, think about it. Like, I mean, it's natural if you're, you know, if you don't have, you know, modern heating and things like that, like in the winter, you're just going to rest. There's not a lot of light if you don't have electricity. You know, like nature kind of tells us naturally what we do, but we're sort of disconnected from that. So we have to sort of think about it more, right? Because in the winter, like nothing grows like that, you know, at, you know, agricultural times before electricity, pre-industrial revolution. I mean, in the winter, you're mostly resting. I mean, you're not, you know, you're not growing food. You kind of working with what you have. You're resting more. You're, you know, anyways, just a side note, but you know, to answer your question, the first thing you do is you have to understand each of these elements, what they are, what the virtue of them is, what that energy is, and then we can go through each of these and like kind of think about more, how does it show up in my life? How is it out of balance? I have too much of this one, too little of that one. And so then we could look at an individual cycle of the day, like at nighttime, am I resting? That'll be like the water element. Am I resting at night? Right? Wood time being like, you know, kind of taking action in the day. You know, and then we can look at it in the seasons, like what am I doing in the spring? Like spring is a time of creation, right? So like, am I, you know, kind of putting out kind of a vision of what I want to do, even though spring is not really the beginning of the year. We actually start the year, calendar year, in the middle, in the winter. And in Chinese Lunar New Year, actually the first day of the year starts with the first day of spring, because that's the birth energy. Right? That's why Chinese New Year is a little later, is like the springtime energy, the beginning of the year, right? So yeah, so you know, in the terms of the wood, understanding what the wood does and what the wood means, which is about creation, it's about vision, it's about everything the rap said. So just read the rap, and then you know what to do for the wood element. What are you gonna say, Steph?
So is the first day of spring in China, is it March 21st like this year? Or
The first day of spring, they do a little bit differently. So like they use a lunar calendar. So like we say the winter solstice is the start of winter, but actually in the lunar calendar, the winter solstice is the middle of winter, right? The winter solstice is the darkest day of the year. That's the height of winter, actually. You know, in a certain way, when you go based on that. So summer, doesn't begin on the equinox.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, the summer solstice. The summer is at its apex, right, at the longest day of the year in that system, right?
Okay, yeah,
So
it always kind of confuses.
it's a little confusing, but that's kind of why.
Because in our culture, the seasons, you know, they say it's the first day of spring and the first day of summer, and you're like, wait a minute, no, it's
Right.
been on for a while.
Exactly. Yeah. So different calendars, like solar calendar versus lunar calendar. Okay. So you guys missed the wrapping part, unfortunately. But you know, you can hear about it.
I recorded it.
Some people recorded it. It's on YouTube. It's on TikTok. It's trending for the kids. Okay.
It's trending in my heart right now.
Okay. So
Actually.
now we're talking about the nature of wood. What is the nature of the wood element? Okay. So one helpful way to think about this is if we think about bamboo. Think about bamboo. Imagine bamboo. So the bamboo is very strong. It derives this strength from, one, it's very rooted, has a very deep root system, very rooted, also very flexible, and also is empty inside. Very interesting. We actually can learn a lot about bamboo, learn a lot from bamboo. So this bamboo derives its strength from its rootedness, very rooted, its flexibility, and its emptiness inside. Okay, so the flexibility, the way that the bamboo bends in the wind, it bends in the wind in proportion to the strength of the wind that's blowing it. So it's this yielding quality. It yields, but it doesn't fall over. Okay, and then it's empty. This emptiness represents non-attachment. So like we might have this very strong growth, rapid directional growth upward, right? Bamboo, like really strong upward movement, but it also is empty. It's unattached to outcome in a certain way. It's non-attachment. And so this kind of growth, but it's not really phased by the wind. It's not really phased by change or external events, the wind, right? Wind represents change, unexpectedness. And so, you know, but we as humans, we often resist and become frustrated. Frustration being the out of balance emotion of wood when we're faced with obstacles, when we're pursuing a goal. So like we're pursuing a goal or we're taking action in the world, and then we have an obstacle that comes up. What do? We get very frustrated. We get really frustrated. We keep banging our head against the wall. Frustration, right? Frustration with obstacles, right? Because wood is all about growth. But naturally, there are always obstacles to growth, right? Like that's just how it is. And so the wind, in this metaphor, wind represents change or obstacles, because I'm trying to grow up, grow up, and then the wind is just shaking. How can I grow when I'm, you know, like this, right? So that's the wind. The bamboo, you know, yields. It has this yielding quality. So for us to emulate this virtue of bamboo, we would remain calm and unattached to these like momentary changes or these momentary deviations from our course, but we still maintain that steady view of the big picture, this big picture view. This is benevolence, actually, having this big picture view. That's benevolence, the virtue of wood, seeing all perspectives, not getting stuck in one perspective. Wood out of balance can become very rigid. You're stuck in this one perspective. Actually, both wood and metal can become rigid. The black and white thinking can be associated with either, different energy underneath. But rigidity of thinking, black and white thinking, can often indicate a wood imbalance or a metal imbalance. So with this bamboo, it will sway in the wind, but then when the wind subsides, it continues to spring upright immediately to reassert its purpose and its direction and its path. But the bamboo doesn't hold a grudge toward the wind that's temporarily waylaid its process. But we often do, right? Like if something slows us down or pushes us off track, seemingly, we might resent that thing. That resentment can generate frustration. That frustration can generate anger. That anger can generate rage, right? So like wind represents change. So we can ask ourselves, how do we deal with change? How do we deal with change? Are we resistant to it? Then we might have a wood imbalance. If we have too much change, then we might have a wood imbalance also, right? If we're just floating in the wind, we don't want that. We actually want the directional movement, but not so phased by all the change around us, but not unfazed by it, right? Because if we have to be adaptive to the, right? So everything balanced, right? And so it's like, it reminds me of this quote. I remember hearing this quote in 2016 and it left an impression, and I found it today. This is a quote by Joe Biden in 2016 when he was vice president. Let me see if I can find it. So he said in 2016, Joe Biden, he says, quote, "We do not scare easily. We never bow. We never bend. We never break when confronted with crisis." Talking about Americans. We never bow. We never bend. We never break when confronted with crisis. No, we endure. We overcome. And we always, always, always move forward, he said, of the United States' strength. This is an expression of the wood element. However, it's out of balance expression because like we shouldn't always be moving forward, right? There's times to not move forward, right? That's the wood element. We should want to always be moving forward, but then there's times when we need to kind of like strategize. It's not always the time to act, right? We need to strategize. That's strategizing. That's the liver and gallbladder, right? Whereas the liver is the general, the gallbladder is sort of the first lieutenant in a way. The gallbladder is like what carries out the action.
Wait, I want to do the whole body with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, over the course of the class, classes, we will, yeah.
Okay.
So is there a practical application to
Mhm.
learning about wood?
Mhm.
I have a boss who is rigid
Mhm.
beyond reality.
Mhm.
And so like, how do you interact with?
Yeah. Well,
Chainsaw.
you have to first do, chainsaw, prune the growth. I mean, definitely practical. But we could look at it sort of like from the level that we're doing, which is sort of like, in a way, kind of the emotional or the spiritual, because then you can make those emotional and spiritual changes in your life, and then the physiology will actually change because that goes both ways, right? But then like for me, like clinically, if I was seeing this person, if I was seeing this patient, I would need to make a diagnosis, like what is actually going on, what's the dynamic that's going on, and then address that with acupuncture, herbs, lifestyle recommendations, qigong, whatever. But first we kind of need the diagnosis, and then
So someone with really, really strong wood would
Yeah.
need a lot of support. Like, what does it need to balance?
What does it
out
need?
To drain out that?
movement, good movements, like I mean, all of these virtues of the wood element. So the wood element is about benevolence, is about virtue. We'll kind of get into a little bit, what does that look like, the journey from anger to benevolence, because that's the journey that a wood person will be on in their life. There will be, the journey, we'll say it many times in the class, the journey of the wood person will be a journey from anger to benevolence. And we'll get more into what that virtue of benevolence would look like. So there's different ways to achieve that. We can achieve that through acupuncture. We can achieve that through herbal medicine. We can achieve that through inner emotional work, qigong, and many different ways. But when you're practicing presencing the healthy expression of the wood, then that will ripple out. Yeah.
I don't know how you can make your boss do any of those things.
I know, that's tough one. Yeah, just observe, diagnose, and judge. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. No, I know
No.
what he's talking about.
Okay, so yeah,
Healing sound session or something.
that could work.
It's like crazy, yeah.
So what is our, so like what is our wood element like? What is my wood element like? You ask yourself, what is my wood element like? Am I like a tall tree, like a tree that's growing really tall, that's overshadowing the growth of everything around me? like an evergreen, right? Evergreen that's so always trying to grow so much that the soil around it becomes acidic and nothing else can grow around it, right? Evergreen, that's what happens. It's trying to grow so much that actually nothing around it can grow. That's a certain expression of the wood element, kind of excessive. It's not wrong, it's not bad, but that's a certain expression. Are we like an evergreen that always trying to grow so nothing around me can really grow? Or am I like a banyan tree? I don't know if you guys have seen this banyan tree. Maybe show a picture, but these are trees that sort of can grow sideways. They don't really grow up, they kind of grow sideways. That is always kind of sending out another branch sideways, and it's never actually progressing very far toward its goal. Is our wood like that? We're always kind of doing new things. We're never actually have directed, steady growth. Am I like a banyan tree? Or am I like a brittle tree, a piece of brittle wood that's deprived of water? Brittle tree. This is kind of like a liver blood deficiency or liver yin deficiency, where I could even be tall. There could be a lot of growth, or it could be short, but in either case, it's not flexible. It's very brittle. It doesn't have suppleness. It doesn't have rootedness. And so if there's a strong wind, I'm going to snap, right? If I have a weak wood element, if there's a lot of change or a lot of obstacle, I'll just break. I'll snap. My wood is not strong. I'm brittle in this way. I'm actually going to break if there's too much change. Banyan tree, yeah, grows sideways, sending out all these new shoots.
Where do they grow? Where are they found?
Hawaii.
Yeah, Hawaii. I think they grow in India as well. I think they're popular in India. And so yeah, we had that quote by Joe Biden, but it's not a Joe Biden problem or a Joe Biden thing. It's not even a Democratic Party thing. It's that's a very American thing, right? We will never bend, we will never break, right? Or like a very modern view. It's not a political thing. It's just that this view of that we'll always never yield, always grow, never yield, right? But actually, that's not that really strong, right? Because we need to be flexible. We need to be able to actually change and adapt. If we're so rigid, we can't adapt to changing scenarios. That's actually not that strong ultimately. Because if there's a strong enough wind, we will break. So that's kind of a modern civilization pathology.
I have a friend who has brain cancer,
Mhm.
but she's kind of like in the middle of a different process.
Mm.
But she said, so she can't use her right arm and her right leg very well right now.
Mm.
And she said, the most amazing thing that the biggest lesson I've learned through all of this is to adapt.
Mm. Adapt.
She says,
Yeah,
she says for me, it really is adapt or die.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is adapt or die. And it's also like, it's a tricky one because like, with an illness, for example, it's like, well, we want to fight the illness, right? And there is a benefit in that, in fighting, in, being able to recognize, who am I, what am I fighting, what am I doing, what am I fighting for? But then not everything can be a battle also at the same time. We have to be able to adapt to change. Because if we're fighting too rigidly all our life, I mean, it could be this scenario that we wrote before, where that's generating internal heat, inflammation, emotional stagnation, body-wide inflammation, as you said earlier. That stagnation turning into inflammation or heat. Inflammation. Now, inflammation is like the buzzword of everything. All diseases are from inflammation. That's kind of like this. It's from stagnation that generates heat. Okay, so the nature of wind being changed, we kind of talked about this. Wind is unpredictable. Wind is associated with the wood element. So we can have external wind physically or change, look at it as change in the world. And we can also have internal wind. And so physiologically, if the liver and gallbladder functioning is not right, if they're not integrated together, working properly, perhaps if we can't adapt to change, if we experience a lot of anger in the presence of these obstacles or perceived obstacles, right? Because in a certain sense, we can say that everything is on the way and not in the way. It's a saying that I like, very wood element, saying that everything is on the way, not in the way. If there's a wood person in your life, tell them that. They'll, I don't know, they might laugh, but that's true. And we could look at it like that. Everything in life is on the way and not in the way. If you think everything's in the way, you're creating a lot of resistance, right? Even if you have a really strong direction, it's like, okay, this new thing, okay, this is on the way. How do I navigate through this? Okay, this happens. How do I navigate through this? How do I, right? You're not like banging your head against the wall. Think about the tree that's growing through the ground. If a sprout hits against a rock, is it going to keep banging its head against the rock? That's stupid. It's going to go around it, right? So we navigate around it. Exactly. Yeah. Or actually, yeah, sometimes also just pure brute force through it. They can do that as well. Or, you know, this bolt, it can navigate through strength. There's a time for that as well. And then also if it can't, like, go through a rock physically, it can go around. It's easier to go around, right? But if there's no way around, sometimes you have to go through. Okay. Yeah. So this wind, so internal winds, okay? So internal winds can basically mean any symptom that has a chaotic and unpredictable movement. So convulsions, we can look at convulsions, muscle twitches and spasms, even headaches sometimes, pain that changes location rapidly. All of these things can signal the presence of internal winds, which is associated in general with the liver. And so this wind, internal wind, can also manifest emotionally as anger that comes in sudden waves, like a storm, right? Whenever there's a change in plan, someone explodes. That can be seen as like a kind of wind or a wood element outburst. Yeah, so this anger, the presence of anger, is going to obstruct our clear vision, which is the virtue of the wood element. We can't really see clearly when we're angry. We only see this one thing. We don't see the whole picture. Okay, so the liver is about the clear vision of seeing everything, seeing the whole picture. It's benevolence. On the flip side of being so rigid, we could also have deficient wood, where we have immense indecisiveness and poor planning, where we're unable to chart any kind of course, and we sort of appear to be blown through life like a leaf in the wind. There's always excess and deficiency scenarios.
So that's deficiency?
Deficiency, you can't decide anything. You're indecisive. You can't plan. You're just kind of going through life. I can mention now also referenced earlier in the wood raft, the substances of alcohol and marijuana, because we can kind of like think about this, kind of like stereotypes, but we can think about these things as far as how they affect the wood element. They can affect other elements and other organs as well. So in a certain sense, alcohol sort of disinhibits the liver. I'll explain what that means in a second. It sort of, in a way, strengthens the gallbladder. Marijuana, in a sense, strengthens the liver and weakens the gallbladder. What do I mean by that? Emotionally, energetically, behaviorally. So, you know, liver is associated with this clear vision, right? And knowing what is right and making the right decisions. Gallbladder is about taking action. So, you know, when you're drunk, alcohol, you're kind of disinhibited. You don't really have a good judgment of things. This is about judgment and kind of knowing what to do. But yeah, you're doing a lot of actions. Like you're kind of like disinhibited in the sense that you kind of can be taking all these action, which gallbladder is taking action, but if it doesn't have clear direction, it will be taking the wrong action. Your judgment is impaired. So you're doing all these things, but they're not really like a clear, you know, and so alcohol is very appealing to a lot of people because they're operating from such this stagnant place. And alcohol kind of it moves the blood. It's blood mover, right? Moves the liver blood. And so in so doing, it also moves the liver chi. It disinhibits. So, you know, people are wound so tight, rigid wood element, then they drink all of a sudden, yeah, just do whatever. Now I'm all fluid. The problem is that then after that, you go back to even more rigid than you were before. That's what happens whenever, you know, substances are involved. They kind of provide an antidote, but not really. It's really more of a short-term solution, right? So in the short term, you feel good because now all of a sudden I can feel, you know, and you just, you know, when living in Washington, D.C., you see this, like work hard, party hard. So you like work so hard and then you're so wound up, so tight, so stagnant. And then on the weekends, what do? Except it's not really a healthy way. And then you get even more tight afterwards because that kind of hangover, which is the extreme bounce back of so much stagnation. Anyways, so that's kind of alcohol. And then marijuana sort of increases, in a certain way, it increases in a sense, the capacity of the liver in terms of the creativity. Like a lot of people will seek out this substance because it makes them in touch with this sort of vision or creativity or seeing things in a different way or seeing really creative, and they have all this creative energy. But then what does it do? Stereotypically, you can't actually actualize those things, right? Or like kind of think of this stereotype of like a stoner who is smoking all the time and they have amazing ideas in their head, but they're not actually really doing anything because they're kind of only focused on this, not taking action.
Kind of like dreaming, not doing.
Exactly, dreaming and not doing. So that's the liver is about dreaming, gallbladder is about doing. So here you have no clear vision and you're acting, doing all these things. Here, yeah, so what you do is you combine them both and then you're fine. No, these things, they don't, you know, they're not really like true medicine because they don't restore the disharmony, in my opinion. I know nowadays, you know, this is very popular now, like, you know, everything is about cannabis and THC and CBD. And, you know, I think there is a medicinal property, but I don't know. I'm not as into it. I do, well, I don't know in the sense that like there are medicinal property, you know, there are research documented benefits, but at the same time, energetically, I don't know if it's like addressing this kind of, you know, if it's like addressing the imbalance overall, helping overall, like it's not my preferred method for patients, you know, so sometimes people, or myself, yeah. Two shots of whiskey or shots of whiskey sour and a spliff tuna. A spliff is marijuana mixed with tobacco. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe this is digression, but
Yeah.
can you comment on like psilocybin and ayahuasca?
I think that those are also very popular. I mean, I think there's a certain sense that increases our vision. You know, right? It is, you know, hallucinatory. Like marijuana also has some hallucinatory properties, so it does kind of like engage us in that creative space, new ways of thinking about things. It does other things too, because it can also enhance like the kind of sensorial, which is more like earth element. But yeah, I think, and some interesting, this is digression, but it's kind of interesting. I'll just throw out a theory that I heard once.
That you experienced?
No, I didn't experience this. I mean, I might have, yeah, well, a friend of his.
We know.
No. Well, when I explained, I mean, I might have experienced this on a DNA level, but so like basically there's a lot of theories about, you know, if you look at evolutionary theory, right? If you believe in evolutionary theory, that human beings evolved from primates, right? But also like when we look at that, it's like kind of like there's a qualitative difference between a human being and other primates, right? Like there's a pretty big gap, right? I mean, everyone would agree there's similarities, but there's a big gap. So, you know, a big question in kind of evolutionary biology is like, how did human beings evolve from other primates? You know, how did they make that big gap? If we look at the brain of a human being, as opposed to the brain of an ape or a chimpanzee or bonobo, etc., the biggest difference of the brain is the cerebral cortex. When you take psilocybin mushrooms, all the activity goes to the cerebral cortex, really, really active. So anyway, there are some theories that trace that posit that, you know, in these areas where the Homo sapien genus kind of emerged was an area where there was large concentration of these psilocybin mushrooms. Could be possible that over generations of consuming this, the brains could have changed, evolved in a certain way. That's one idea. That's one theory that's out there. No way to prove that, I don't think. Anyway, okay, a little off track, but it's interesting stuff. Any other questions while we're off track?
Yeah, so to detail like the effects on some of the organs, like you did with.
Yeah, tricky. I mean, we can we can look into the, you know, in terms of the spirits, the 5 spirits, right? And so in the context of the wood, because we're talking about the wood element, the hun, this ethereal soul. So sometimes people can experience with those substances that this imaginative ethereal soul kind of travels, sort of like we do in a dream state, where we have visions, or we have some connection to something outside of ourselves, or some connection with ancestors, some connection with God, some connection with this sort of broader collective consciousness, which in wood element would be seen in the wood element, could be seen in the wood element as the hun, this ethereal soul. So, you know, that's in the context of the wood of this, because we're talking about wood. That's what that can happen in those kind of ceremonies, that the wood element face. This guy's smiling at me the whole time. Oh gosh.
Just keep going.
Um,
Just show me like through a
yes.
sample with wood and resistance and brittle. Yeah, keep doing that.
Yeah, well, I'm just doing what I'm doing. Yeah.
See, and I'm feeding off her too. So that's how I know I'm like
Okay.
the dynamic. I love it.
So let's see. We talked about the
Yeah,
storm,
we went through the whiskey sour and.
whiskey sour, and the weed. Yeah, and the hun we talked about already. So okay, let's talk about a little bit about this transformation of anger into benevolence, which we've alluded to. So, or we can say from belligerence into benevolence, belligerence into
Ooh.
benevolence, belligerence into benevolence. So, you know, one way to look at benevolence is this force that kind of empowers the evolutionary journey of consciousness from all things from earth to heaven. Again, from water to fire, from the lower to the higher, from earth to heaven. Not meaning heaven like paradise or religious connotation, but just sort of meaning this higher realm. I mean, we can have the religious connotation, you don't need it. The heaven in Chinese, it doesn't necessarily have the same exact connotations, but some.
What does
But
it mean in Chinese?
well, so the word heaven, tian, it means heaven, but also can just mean sort of atmosphere or sky. So like we say in Chinese, like tianqi means weather. Actually, tianqi is sort of like the energy of the heavens, but it's not heaven. It's like it's also associated with the sky. Like it could easily, we could say sky as opposed to earth. So sometimes like we have in English, we could say like up in the sky, or you know, the man in the sky or something like that is also like heaven, but it doesn't necessarily have a religious connotation. It's used in like a lot of everyday to sort of mean like the weather or like the changing forces. But like these external forces that are acting on us, it is and it isn't, because there is this idea of like, you know, there's this force that's acting on us, but it's also like, it's not separated from all these forces that happen from the day to day. It's just all these kind of forces that are acting on us in Chinese. So it's like, there's what we're doing. Human beings are special. Human beings are special because we're between heaven and earth in Chinese. We're between heaven and earth, right? So we have these three levels, right? We have these three levels of heaven, tian. We have this level of earth, di, earth, and then we have human or man, human. And so humans are special because they mediate between heaven and earth. And again, that it can have a religious, cannot. It can just be by virtue of our orientation, because we stand upright. So the upper part of our body points to heaven, lower part, earth. So there's a certain sense in which human beings, we contain all of those other energies from the other animals. In a sense, like human being has the energy of a bear, but the bear doesn't have the energy of the human being. There's this idea, because we can walk on all fours too, but we can also walk upright. They can sort of walk upright, but it's not the same.
Well, our breath is the connection between them.
Our breath is the connection between heaven and earth. Yeah, that's an important concept. And that, what did I want to say there also? Yeah.
Is there a goal in the 5 elements as far as your practice? Because,
Health.
okay, in feng shui, when I walk into a room, I'm looking at what elements are off and what needs to
Harmony, right?
be
Harmony.
space.
Harmony.
But it's so yummy and balanced. You feel great.
Exactly. You feel good.
You don't feel off.
Exactly that. And health, harmony, because if you're moving fluidly through life, like there's no disease, right? If you're just moving fluidly through life, no obstacles, then eventually you become, you turn 100 and then you die and you become an immortal. That's like the idea or the ideal in Taoism. I mean, in Taoism, this idea that, if you move so fluidly through life and you kind of like are able to alchemize all of these things and not get stuck and just like not really care in a certain sense, like, you care when it's time to care, but you don't care when it's time to not care. And you just move so fluidly through life, you navigate through the world with no obstacles, and then you turn 100 and you just fly away on a phoenix. That's the idea. That's the ideal. That's immortality.
You're getting into a rap right there. Start the beat.
So there's certain herbs that also can be used to help with that cultivational practice. But that you only take those herbs when you're very healthy. If you're unhealthy, you need to get to balance first. So in this text called the Shenong Bansao.
Take the herbs until you are healthy.
Yeah. So certain herbs would be more like you take when you're well. They're better when you're well, and those are ones that. So okay, there's this book called the Shenong Bansao Jing, which means the divine farmer's materia medica. It's this mythological figure in China, the divine farmer, who mythologically was the founder of herbal medicine. He had a glass stomach, and he would eat these herbs and see exactly what happened in the whole system. That's this mythological figure, Shenong, the divine farmer, divine husbandsman. So anyway, this book called the Shenong Bansao Jing organizes the herbs into three classes: the superior class of herbs, the middle grade herbs, and then the inferior herbs. Inferior grade meaning to treat disease, and they're often toxic. But there's a place for those actually, because if you're sick, you need very strong and sometimes toxic medicinals to actually fight that disease. You shouldn't use the superior grade herbs for those because they don't work for that. In this system, that divides herbs into three levels. And then the middle grade is to treat the constitution, or to treat kind of like the pattern. And then the superior herbs are, when you read the descriptions of these superior herbs, they're like make one light, make one able to walk on water, etc. Like they're like, everything's going well, but I'm just trying to unlock other levels of consciousness. That'll be the superior herbs. But if you're diseased, you should have focus on the inferior herbs, the ones that treat disease. If you're pretty good, but you still have some kind of patterns of disharmony, then the middle grade herbs. That's just one way.
How you use herbs?
Not really.
So,
Not really. Yes and no. I mean, I think about that stuff more. I just usually treat the pattern, but in a sense, like, I mean, there are people who are like coming in and this is rare. Usually people are coming in when they're pretty ill, or at least in the middle level. But if someone's like really, healthy, and they're just like, I just want to work on evolving my consciousness. That doesn't really happen that often. A couple times.
Are you there?
No, I mean, yes and no in certain ways, but then in other ways I have my stuff, and inflammation and things like that. And so I take some inferior herbs as well. Yeah, so if someone's on that level, we can work on that. And, we don't always have to think you have to be perfect in order to take these herbs. We can hold it a little more loosely. But yeah, I'll just mention the first herb of that superior grade, which is called Lingzhi, which is Ganoderma mushroom, which is I don't know how to spell it, Ganoderma, which is reishi, same as reishi mushroom. And we talked in past classes about the spiritual properties of mushrooms. Not, all types of mushrooms, but mushrooms very prized by the Taoists because they grow out of total darkness. They thrive in very yin areas, dark, moist areas that they transform into light. So that's like very Taoist, endarkenment, as opposed to enlightenment. So the Lingzhi, the reishi mushroom, which means this ling, actually same ling that we said earlier in the wrap, which is spiritual mushroom. But it's not this. That's not the magic mushrooms. This is psilocybin. This is Ganoderma reishi mushrooms. It's not psychoactive, but it's spiritually active.
How long have you taken that?
I should take it for longer. I haven't taken it for that long, just on and off. But I actually have a tincture of it that I'm gonna work on as a thing that people can take. Okay, so yeah, a lot of lecture today, because you guys have so many good questions. Let's see, anything else I wanted to say? Yeah, we talked about the marijuana and alcohol. Let me read a passage from this book. This is a book called Nourishing Destiny by Ilani Jarrett. This is around the life thesis of wood. So just trying to like understand sort of the more into the nature of the wood elements. And in this, I mean, already through this conversation, maybe you have identified people in your life that are like, oh, this is what they're like, wood element, they have an imbalance there. But this maybe get a little bit deeper into the life thesis, what's called the life thesis of wood. It's a little bit kind of heady, but it should hopefully make sense, more or less. It is the nature of life that the cutting edge of our growth is always blocked. This resistance empowers the process of natural selection by helping assure that the strongest survive. So saying that like resistance is not necessarily a bad thing. The resistance, the obstacles that we go through in life. When a seed is planted, the sprout must first poke through the shell of the seed and then navigate its way through the resistance of the dirt to the surface. It may encounter rocks or other obstacles that it must grow around. After finally beginning to grow, it may need to seek out sunlight in the shadow of other taller plants. So all these things of resistance, just like in our life, we encounter all these obstacles. So this resistance that accompanies growth isn't actually a natural part of life. However, those of a wood constitution can interpret this resistance as indicating a fundamental truth about the nature of life itself. They get stuck on the resistance. They can get stuck on the resistance part. So externally, their unconscious reaction to anger that arises, is projected onto life. And then they believe that life is unjust. This can happen. Life is not fair. All these things are happening to me. It's not fair. It's wood, out of balance, because you're stuck on the obstacles. Internally, they can direct anger toward themselves as well and interpret any resistance to their plans as constituting a personal failure that results in insecurity or self-esteem. Right, so that anger can be directed externally, that anger could be directed internally, often both. So the key life themes for those of a wood constitution involve the integration of planning and decision-making in a graceful manner and in a way presided over by the virtue of benevolence. Okay, so if your wood constitution is about planning and decision-making in a graceful way, flexibility, and in a way that is where there's benevolence that's present. Being able to see all perspectives, not just getting stuck on one thing. If the habitual reaction to anger, if every time we experience anger in the self or in the others, if our reaction to that obscures our ability to feel benevolence, then the life theme is distorted into a thesis which compromises balanced relationship to growth in every aspect of being. Kind of wordy. Basically saying that if we're experiencing this anger all the time, we don't really have healthy growth in all areas of our life. Sometimes we can have this can show up as arrogance or humility if it's balanced. Those are representing the distortion. Actually, here he's saying in these cases, the themes of arrogance or humility are distortions of the virtue of benevolence. So humility meaning like a lack of, like the humility usually translated as a good thing, but here we're meaning it as like a lack of integrity, like a lack of strength, timidity, as opposed to benevolence, which is about kind of taking action and taking your place. Sometimes a wood constitution can have like a life theme that says something along the lines of, my vision is so accurate that my plans and decisions must be asserted continually, regardless of the consequence to anything or anyone that gets in the way, including myself. And if it's in a deficient, that's excess. If it's in more of a deficient way, we can state it as every time I try to do anything, life cuts me down. Every time I try to do something, life cuts me down. I can't really do anything. Any questions? So like, one question to ask yourself is, or, about someone else is like, how do you deal with anger? How does a person deal with anger? This is key. Because if you're embodying the virtue of benevolence, you're able to see other perspectives. In fact, if you're in a state of benevolence, you can bring others to that state by embodying that. So you can actually, if you're very balanced, you can bring others out of the emotion of anger into benevolence. So like, theoretically, like with your boss, how do I bring him out? Her out, sorry, is by you be very benevolent. I mean, like, I don't know how much time you're spending with this person, but like, if enough people around this person are embodying the virtues, that person might change. They might change, they might not, because we can never actually change someone. All we can do is present something with them, offer them an invitation. We don't know really their path or their Tao, their destiny. There's the whole life they could be stuck in this. We can't really control that. We can only work with our relationship to that person, and we'll be like, ooh, in their presence, actually, I feel a lot of anger. That's what you can work with. How do I transform into benevolence? Whether that changes them, you don't know. You can't, if our goal is on changing the other, we're going to be, again, constantly disappointed because we can't.
So we want to entrain them to where we're at.
Yeah.
Ideally, we're the one that's higher.
Well,
Or
yeah, I mean,
them.
you could be higher or lower, but if like that person is open to change, because the reality is there's lessons all around us all the time. It's just like, how are we incorporating these lessons? And, interestingly, if we're stuck in one place, we will keep encountering the same lesson again and again and again and again, because that's where we're at. That's where our theme, that's our lens of viewing the world. So for a wood person, this is very key, right? Like for a wood person, the theme of your life, what you're going to keep encountering is obstacles. It's like, oh, you don't like obstacles? You're going to encounter them again and again and again and again until you learn how to deal with them, or until you die. And then and then you deal with it later, So yeah, you'll keep encountering, but so part of it, you could look at it, part of it is the lessons that the universe or the lessons that God will put in front of you. Or you could also look at it from the perspective of like, that's your lens that you're viewing the world. So you're going to keep seeing that happen. Like there's so many things to see, but you're with that lens. So you're going to keep seeing everything as obstacle. Whereas the same thing can happen for someone else and they can see just the loss in everything and grief, right? A metal person. So you can look at it as, as that life is curated for you to learn these lessons. Or you can be like, well, I'm in this lens. Let me, work within that lens. I get stuck in this lens. So that's a good question. It's a big question. That's one we talked a lot about with the 5-element intro class. There's some people who believe that you have a constitution that you're born with, like you're a wood person from birth. It's your destiny. There's others that believe that you might experience a certain wound in childhood that kind of sets you on that track. You experience a deep loss when you're a child, and then you become a metal person. That becomes your theme. I'm more on the side of that. I think that like sort of it's both, but more on the side of that we have a nature, because two people can experience the same event completely differently, right? Like look at two kids who experience the same event. Father dies, let's say, traumatic event, loss. One can experience it and the main emotion will be grief. Another can experience it and they have a lot of anger. Or father leaves, let's say that. Maybe better. Father leaves, because the other one is like really more grief, but father leaves. That could experience as grief. It could be anger. It could be sadness. It could be happiness. It could be excess joy, mania. Like it could be many things, right? It depends on the nature of the person, I think.
What do you keep encountering?
Well, I'm a wood person, actually. So for me, it's like this, having this vision and then navigating obstacles. That is a big thing.
But what is
for me? Always different things.
Oh, is it?
Always different things. And so so as a wood person, if I'm a wood person, I want to practice being like flexible with everything that happens and being able to move fluidly but not move too much, right? And like that. So yeah.
We were just at the grocery store right before we came here, and one of my friends was saying that she has these kids that one's getting ready. A couple of them live in town. We live in Nephi, and one he just got out of the army. He's getting ready to move back to our little small town. And she says, "Oh, I'm so worried they're not going to get along." She's like, "I'm not sure how it's going to go." And she said, "I can't believe that these children that came from us were raised exactly the same. That they are so different."
Yeah.
And she says they literally have different memories
of the same events.
The same time.
Yep.
Of the same event. She brought that up right before we came here.
Yeah. So, I think like for people who have kids, so like there's a certain perspective that says like, oh, you can't really tell the constitution of someone until they're like 4 or 5 or 6. Before that, they're just like pure being, whatever. But others who say, no, actually you can tell within 6 months. After 6 months, you can tell, like even from babies, like you can tell very different, 9 months, something like that. So yeah, so it's like, is that because they experienced some trauma at 6 months? I don't think so. No, I think that's because, I mean, maybe, but I think it's because that's their nature.
And then can
The
you
personality.
intentionally change to where you want to be?
From that perspective, no, you can't change your nature. You can change within your nature. What you can do is transform. Yeah, you can and there might be like different flavors within that. Like if I'm a wood person, I could be going through a metal time of life, right? Aging, that's not the wood time of life, but it's going to show up in the, like that's going to be the metal. So okay, we can show the thing. So within each of these elements there, you can see these little circles. So like within wood, there's like all these different sub energies. So like, what does the metal within wood look like? And so on. Yeah, I can actually set it. The people on the screen can't see it, but
Oh,
that's okay.
sorry. I
No, it's
forgot
okay.
bonus.
I mean, it's fine. There might be some people watch the recording, but they already saw it.
Could I take a picture? of it?
Totally. Yeah, so I'll just leave that there.
Where's
I'll
the,
take it after.
diagram of it on the back of one of your papers,
Just not as like.
Okay.
but
So
not.
yeah,
So
still
why
take
does
this picture.
fire have
Two.
four?
We'll get to that next time. Yeah, with fire. So as we're saying, how does someone deal with anger? And as I said, if you're in a benevolence place, we got a little off track because we talked about changing other people and, what's your destiny, etc. But if you're in a place of benevolence, you can see other perspectives and theoretically you can bring others to that state. But if you're in an excess, too much wood or imbalanced wood, excess usually meaning stagnation. I mean, you can't really have too much. It's just not moving properly. But if you have excess wood, you know how you might deal with anger, or let's say you encounter anger in the world, someone's angry. If you're excess, you might respond with anger, and then there's conflict, it escalates, right? Like that's because that energy is out of balance within yourself. It triggers that response. So, okay, how do you deal with anger? Do you deal with someone's anger by anger yourself? That might be a problem. Or if you're deficient wood, you might respond with timidity, right? No gall. And so you can't meet that at all. Right? Because when someone's angry, they don't want you to be passive. That's actually the thing about anger. They want someone to meet that, but theoretically in a healthy way. They might think they want a conflict, but what they really want is to be seen. They want a clear path. I'm angry because this is happening. Okay, well then this is what we're going to do. Oh, okay. And then they're good. That dissolves it. But what doesn't dissolve it is being timid, is actually trying to diffuse it of like, oh, there's no reason to be angry. Like if someone's angry, that's actually like one of the worst things you can do, right? Because that's going to feed it and they get even more angry, right? So in an attempt to diffuse the emotion, it can actually amplify it because the wood element, like any element, needs to be seen, needs to be engaged with. You can think about a conflict with kids. Like let's say you have two kids, they're both angry at each other. If you're just like, everything's fine, don't worry about it, that doesn't work, right? That almost never would work. To diffuse it, that would add more fuel. No, this is the problem because da 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 da. No, this is the problem because da 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 da. You can diffuse it by benevolence. What is benevolence? Seeing both sides. Okay, this is what you want. This is what you want. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do this. Da da da. Okay, that's what we do. There might be still some resistance to that, but that's the path forward. Is actually seeing the path forward, being able to see, all perspectives, and then what are we going to do? Action, taking action. That's wood, healthy wood. The unhealthy would be like, you would respond with anger. That's not helpful. Responding with passivity, that's not helpful either.
Responding with the path.
With a path, exactly. That's what the wood needs.
I'm angry and my husband's defensive,
Defensive, that's anger. Yeah, that's anger with anger.
but it's like different. Is that?
Well, it
okay?
could be. It could be. Is that okay?
Is that like, okay,
It is what it
yeah.
is.
No,
Yeah.
They are not the same.
No, okay. Well,
In our
defense.
situation.
Yeah. So defense. I mean, that could be. That could be. That could be what we're talking about is a wood metal dynamic. It could potentially be a wood metal dynamic, which could be because if it's like they're getting defensive, like their sort of self-worth is down, like they feel like, oh, you're like attacking me, sort of. That could be what we would call like what the because metal is supposed to control wood, but if wood is counteracting on metal and that anger is going back and then impacting metal, then that can be that dynamic. Yeah, because that's the thing. All of there's not one isolated element. They're all interacting with each other in a certain way. So it kind of depends on like what his nature is, where his wound is, or whatever. And there could be multiple wounds, but where he gets stuck. Because people will respond to difficult situations from where they're out of balance. So like for me, usually when I have a lot of frustration and anger that comes up when I when things come around. I don't know why, well, in this sense, but like in that situation, like it's just a feeling of anger. By the way, anger, I wanted to say something about that. Anger and wrath, and that's wrath in and of itself is a very wood element type thing. It's like it's very creative, it's often very staccato. It's sort of often the themes in rap are like kind of externalizing struggles, a lot of anger, frustration expressed often as well. Of course, like there can be all the elements within any one thing, but a lot of times that. Okay.
Could you say that again? You said people respond from.
Yeah, usually from their, from their nature or their wound, right? Like we're saying, like, 5 different people experiencing the same event, they might interpret it in different ways. And if you're a wood person, probably the most predominant emotion that comes up in your life would be frustration or anger. Not that you don't experience the others, obviously you do. But that would be kind of like where you default to.
So is there a counterbalance measure that you could, like, whatever your wound is, to balance that?
That's the virtue. That's the virtue, cultivating that virtue of benevolence, seeing all perspectives, Instead of getting angry, you get very tunnel vision, right? You're stuck on this obstacle.
And like the Tao, are you looking for the middle road, as opposed to your
Everything.
extremes with your wood or whatever?
Yeah, good question. I mean, yeah, you're looking for the middle road, but the middle road for a wood person would look different than the middle road for an earth person, because they have different, like in a sense, they have a different destiny, right? For a wood person, wood is about actualization in the world. It's about putting a vision into action, taking action in the world. For an earth person, it's a little bit different. It's about savoring, digesting, processing, savoring, the little things in life, for example. That's different, very different energy. Very different energy. So yeah, the middle road will look different but yeah, it is always about the middle road.
The destination for what?
The destiny, I mean, yeah, kind of like the wood middle road is going to be like, it has to be creative. Like wood is about creativity, about acting in the world, taking action. So for wood, there has to be some sort of creative, their vision that's executed in the world. That's huge for a wood element. And that can be present with everyone, because we all have all of these 5 elements and all of these 5 needs. But it's like, what's the theme? What's like the big thing that things circle back to? So like, this thing is in my way because I need to do this in my life. I need to create this thing, and all these obstacles are getting in my way. That's a wood conversation.
So if you're running a practice as
Mhm.
an acupuncturist,
Mhm.
are you gonna look for somebody with a balancing
Yeah.
element?
Ideally, yeah, that's a great way to look at it. Yeah, you want to harmonize. Exactly. Yeah,
So we have all 5 elements
for sure.
and we just identify with the one that's most prominent.
Yeah, the one that comes up the most.
Adaptability.
Mhm.
I listened to your conversation
Mm-hmm.
and I can recognize each characteristic or trait
Mm.
in myself
Mm-hmm.
and understand my relationship to what's happening,
Mm-hmm.
and it exhibits it in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So, we all experience all of them, all of the emotions, all of the elements. We all have all of them. We have all the organs. We have all the virtues. We have all of those things. But, from a certain perspective, not everyone believes this, but like some people believe in constitution, that you have one type that's sort of like your nature, and that you work with. Others believe, no, it's just that we have all of them, and we need to balance all of them. Maybe at one time in our life we really need to work on a wood element, another time we really need to focus on the metal. Different perspectives about that, but yeah, we have all
Well,
of
and
these
different
elements.
relationships, like with, we can be one or the other with
Exactly.
different relationships.
Yeah.
One small thing about Jeff Alter, he has a mushroom log under his bed.
Multiple.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's
he'll
awesome.
be cultivating mushrooms.
Yeah.
For tinctures and stuff.
Yeah.
We've got a ton of fungi.
Uh-huh.
The most
Amazing.
thing.
Have you seen, there's this TED talk?
Fantastic
Yeah.
fungi.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yes. Paul Stamets.
Yeah. Amazing. That
Yeah.
guy
That
is so cool.
he's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's and like he delivered from like an easy way. You guys can like look this up. there was a TED talk maybe like 8 years ago at this point. Paul Stamets is like 7 ways that mushrooms can save the world or something like that. He makes a very compelling case. They're amazing.
Not only is it spiritual, but it's scientific.
It's scientific, totally scientific. Totally scientific. I mean, they can literally,
This is an aha moment.
you can put mushrooms in a nuclear waste site, and within a couple of months, it will be like a flourishing garden. I mean, they're really incredible, and they're more human, right? They're more human than they are plant. Their DNA is closer to humans than it is to plants. That's pretty interesting.
For real?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Interesting.
This is what I know about mushrooms.
you gotta see the movie.
Some people even believe, while we're talking about these crazy outsider theories, because we're talking about the mushrooms, some people believe that mushrooms came from outer space or some kind of asteroid, because they're so different than every other genus on Earth in terms of the animals and plants. They're different. That believe that they're not really from this Earth. They're from some other place that they came, and then they're like here to help us learn how to heal as a society or things like that. There's all these ideas. Anyway, mushrooms are very fascinating. Okay, we actually only have a few minutes left of class. We did start late. We can go over a little bit. People can leave at 9 if they need to. But what I want to do actually for the last few minutes is we're do a little exercise. We basically talked about the wood element, and now we're going to do something that we did last week, where I'm going to have one person volunteer from the class, and we're going to kind of walk through the 5 elements. So do I have any volunteers? And then I'll explain more about what we're doing, or I can explain, if there's no volunteers, I can explain more. Okay, I saw your hand first. You can come on up. So yeah, we'll have you stand up. I mean, I don't know. You can maybe, yeah, like kneel down in the middle. It sounds like an altar or something. I don't know. Right. Yeah.
Oh, does this involve stabbing? No. Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So okay, yeah. So we're gonna walk around these 5 elements.
I'm going
Five
to.
elements.
Yeah. Yeah, move your body.
So let's actually, and then for the video,
Oh, it's like right on me.
Perfect.
for now,
Oh,
you can go. You can reposition.
Hide
Okay.
yourself.
Enjoy the spotlight.
Remember your name again? Roman, right. Who was our? So basically, Roman, what we're gonna do is we're gonna start over here on the blue, which is water element, which is where we started last week. Actually, yeah, let's start with water. So basically what we're gonna do here is you're gonna hold in your mind, in your being, someone like a beloved, someone in your life, someone that you're in life with. Could be a partner, could be a parent, could be a child, like someone who you kind of are in life with, that you interact with regularly. You have someone in mind. So can you want to say their name? If you want, actually helpful, you can say their name and their relationship with you.
My child.
Okay, Cruz. Okay, so we're starting in the water elements. And the water elements again, and actually I'll write these on the board. And you guys you can look at the chart that I handed out. So that chart that has all the correspondences of the 5 elements. So you guys can read like the gift. I think it says the gift. So what's the gift for water?
Listening.
Yeah, keep listening. And what's the gift for wood?
New possibility.
New possibility. And then fire.
Partnership.
And then we have earth.
Support, touch.
Yeah, support or touch. And then metal.
Acknowledgement, sacred space.
Okay, anyway, just put these on the board. So we're gonna go through these 5, and kind of like what you're gonna be thinking about is your relationship. And like, are you able to, like, how do you show up for them? How do you show up for them? And like, are you able to like offer that? Or what are the ways that you do this really well? What are the ways that you might want to do it? Like try a new way of being, right? Because often we can get stuck in sort of patterns of like, I really good at relating to this person from a fire element, but not necessarily water or something like that. So we're gonna kind of like see how because in any relationship, we want to be able to move fluidly between all these. So water element and their name again? Cruise, right, cruise. So with cruise, the water element is about stillness, it's about receptivity and listening, deep listening. So with cruise, how does like stillness show up in your relationship with cruise? Are you practicing stillness and being in silence, being in stillness, being in deep listening, not commenting, being in deep listening, stillness, and being receptive to cruise?
So we meditate. So is that practicing stillness?
That's definitely practicing stillness. Yeah, stillness and silence.
And then
Right?
he's 10. So we do meditation every day, or
Mhm.
on a perfect day we do it.
Yeah, awesome.
And then we just try to. I think I tried to quiet it down by like trying not to be angry and not yelling.
Okay.
I try to do that all the time.
Mhm.
I try.
Mhm.
Try, not succeed. But so I try to listen to them and go with them.
Okay. And so, yeah, there's times when you're talking with Cruz and like you're just listening.
Yeah, and then I kind of let them guide. You know, like if they want to
Mhm.
go dig a hole all day, we'll go dig a hole all day, or build a tree house, we'll do that. whatever.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, so that's the water element: stillness, receptivity, listening, deep listening. Listening, not thinking about what you're going to say next, just listening. Okay, so let's move on to the wood, the green circle, wood. So with Cruz, the wood element is about direction, creation, new possibility. This is what we say the gift of the wood element is new possibility, seeing things in a new way. So is there with Cruz, is there this kind of like how does that show up, being able to offer new possibility, new things, creation?
Yeah, I think with Cruz, so I homeschool my little boys. So I if they're interested in something, we'll just go for it. You know, like I said, yesterday was digging a hole, so we've been digging a hole for a lot of hours, you know. And then before that was building a tree house in a marsh. So we're trying to build a tree house in the marsh, and but kind of just letting them facilitating him and his brother to just get out there and explore and do their thing. And even like when they want to learn and when they don't want to learn.
Yeah, so you know, the wood element, when it's in balance, it's kind of like you're sort of collaborating with them. Right. You know, you're introducing new possibilities. Also, this is part of the wood element, right? Like people get kind of stuck in their way of doing things or in their belief or something. Wood element is like, okay, how about looking at it from this perspective, right? Or how about
I have my
this
plan,
possibility?
And then their plans, and then we kind of like
exactly, and then that collaboration. So that's the wood, is like, am I one so timid that I'm letting them do whatever they want, or am I so rigid that I'm only stuck on my possibility? Like I'm only stuck on what I want them to do. Am I able to introduce new possibility, but be a little bit flexible with it, and then kind of collaborate with them? Yeah. Okay, so we can move on to the fire element. And we say here as partnership, and what we mean by this is like fire element is about, I mean, among other things, like about having fun. So like, am I able to like be spontaneous, have fun, do fun things with this person, with Cruz? How does that show up?
Same way, just kind of being flexible and letting him, you know, decide what they want to do. I have a couple things that we need to do that I'd like them to do during the day, and then we negotiate around it all the time.
That sounds more like planning wood.
Okay.
so like fire is kind of like, you know, is like play, more like spontaneous play. Kind of like lightness would be, not so much planning
Well, I think
activities,
just the lack
Mhm.
of planning or just
Mm.
just letting that.
like having
Right.
spontaneous flow in the day and kind of,
We might be outside or it might be inside or it might
uh-huh.
be also another place and just
So having kind of like spontaneity and kind of like,
flexibility.
and play, like room for fun, like having fun and play. Mhm.
Mhm.
Mhm. Okay, so that's how that shows up. And then we can move on to the earth element, which is, we say here, like providing support, physical touch. You know, the earth element is not so much about planning,
Planting?
planning. It's not about planning or planting. Those would both be like word things. It's about that, yeah, kind of like, it's about like really holding like support and being very like tender, supportive with touch. Earthy, like earth element is traditionally associated with the mother, maternal. Earth associated with mother, metal associated with father. The earth element is about support and touch, showing care in that kind of like very tending, caring, touchy way. Yeah. So how does that show up? How does
Go
that
more
show up?
into your earth. I love that.
That was as much as I could do.
I know.
So you're not an earth person.
I can go there. I can go there.
She's teaching him though.
She's earthy. She's very earthy.
So yeah, this shows up. He's the littlest. He's the youngest, but he's also really little. And he likes being carried on my shoulders.
Mhm.
So part of my fitness goals for life is to stay fit enough to carry him on my shoulders until he's like 45 years old. As long as he'll get on my shoulders, I'll put him on my shoulders all the time. And then at night, sometimes he'll crawl into bed with me. I'm a single dad, and so I'll just like, just
that
just
touch,
let him.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's sometimes I can't sleep because he's like flopping around and stuff. But I cherish the time when I could just like hold his little hand.
That's
just,
awesome.
touch him and stuff,
Yeah.
'cause that's fleeting, like
Yeah.
he'll become 11 and be,
Yeah. Totally.
so, as much as
Totally.
and I
Yeah.
feel like touch is like very therapeutic.
Mhm.
I most of my background is as a first responder,
Mm.
and it's just like magical. Like when someone's screwed up, like they'll remember you, like holding their hand or like touching them.
Yeah, and that touch kind of,
Pro.
yeah, that touch, can correspond with the situation, right? And so it's like finding the way that we can, like that touch can be in a handshake, it can be in a hand on the shoulder, it can be,
there's so much psychology behind it, like
There's-
sales and everything. Like the more you
Mhm.
touch someone or whatever, it's
Mhm.
just better. Everything's
Yeah.
better. So that's why.
And also all of these 5 elements, we can
I said I'm gonna fly you an acro to give you an idea of what I'm talking about.
of touch and yeah.
If you want to, you know what acronym it is.
Mhm.
It's cool.
You'll feel it.
Always.
And so all of these, all these elements we could also look at in terms of conversation. Within talking, within conversation, we can be conversing in a water way, in a wood way, fire, earth way. So the earth way of communicating is very different than the metal way of communicating. So the earth way of communicating is being very much like, you're holding space in the sense of like you're holding them. Like it feels like in the conversation you're kind of like holding them very closely to support, and it shows up in a sing song like, so like what I hear you saying is that blah 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 blah. It's a lot of like reflecting back, digesting and holding. So it almost sounds like they're singing. So if someone's an earth person, they might sort of need that to be met at that level in some ways. Or you can get into more nuance. If they're earth out of balance, maybe you need wood to structure the earth, because wood controls earth by structuring it, right? If you have earth that just has no form, right? It's just like no growth, it will erode. It will erode. So actually wood controls earth by preventing erosion. So it kind of provides the structure necessary to hold the earth. So that's another, you can get into more nuanced ways of like supporting someone's earth element. You can be earth, you can presence earth, you can presence wood if you want to control the earth, excess earth. You can be fire because fire generates earth, mother of earth. Anyway, so I just want to point out that within conversation, we can do all of these things. So we can think about it like that as well. And I'll ask you the question, but I'm asking everyone to think of the person in mind that you're thinking of. And like, when you have conversations with that person, are you able to kind of like be like, presence, that earth element of like, I got you, I hear you, I'm not judging anything you're saying, I'm really supporting, I'm valuing, I'm repeating back to you. Earth is about repetition, repeating back to you, etc. So that's earth. And then let's move on to metal. So metal element has a lot to do with space, spaciousness. And the gift of metal, we say, is, it's kind of can say these two gifts. One of the gifts is acknowledgement. So metal is being able to identify the gem. It's about this distillation, purification, to distill kind of the gem of the situation. So interpersonally, this can look like I'm able to like see the best in this person. I'm able to see the gem, kind of like the essence of that person, like the best in them, and then actually verbalize it, acknowledgement of like, this is what I see in you, like kind of seeing that pure essence of something, distillation of them, and then into this pure essence. So that's offering acknowledgement, one of the most powerful gifts that we can offer. In the workplace, by the way, like when workers are surveyed of what is most missing in the office, and they say it is acknowledgement. They're not acknowledged for their work. They're not seen for what they're doing. They're just doing all this work. They're not acknowledged. So very important within a relationship and within someone else, within workplace, etc. Offering acknowledgement. I see this in you. This is what I see. Like acknowledgement. So are you able to offer acknowledgement to crews? How does that show up?
Acknowledgement to crews. I think just repeating over and over that he could do whatever he wants to do. Like he wanted money, so we did a lemonade stand. He made like $80 now. And I was like, I was like, we live in Midway, so tons of money. Yeah. So like just showing him how he could create stuff on his own, and then just kind of guiding that potential.
Kind of for affirmation.
Yeah, he's really into weird stuff, and so just like feeding that, like do it all, do it as much as you can.
What's weird?
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, I mean, just he's really, he loves Russia right now.
Okay.
He loves Russia. He loves
Interesting.
Putin,
Russia.
and Stalin, and Lenin. He knows everything about them.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, he
Interesting
wants
history.
Russian flags, and I mean, he's just. I mean,
yeah,
he's not going to join a terrorist group.
Right.
Yeah. Like I'm just like,
yeah,
awesome. Let's learn Russian. Let's do everything Russian.
Totally.
So, what's that? I don't. No, I don't. Sorry.
I took it in college.
Awesome. But yeah, just whatever he's into, just kind of feeding that.
Yeah. So that support and that kind of like support and creation.
It was really cool, man.
Yeah. I don't know if that's metal still. So metal, like, it's like, let's think about this specific example of like imagine you're offering to cruise. Like what I see in you is blah, 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 blah. Offering this kind of like specific acknowledgement of like, this is like your essence. Yeah, so sit with that, and like that being able to, it can be a little bit pretty vulnerable and like kind of like, this is what I see in you of like, and seeing this kind of like into the essence of that person, and then verbalizing that, or acknowledging something that they did or something that they are, of this like acknowledgement, bringing that to the surface.
It's something that they're good at, and something that you see, right?
Something that what you see in them. Yeah.
Or
what you
one
see
thing that comes up with my other child, his older brother, if I could add this, is like, it's come up a couple times. It's like he's hurting. He just seems like more quiet, reserved, and kind of like and it just came up right now. It's like, he's hurting. So I don't know. And I'm trying to bend over backwards.
Yeah. So one way from this energy is like sitting, maybe sit with it. Maybe think of it of like, when I think about this person, like what do I see as like their gift in the world? Like how are they teaching me about different ways of being, or like what am I seeing as them? It'd be like, what I see, like this is what I see in you, kind of like seeing someone on that level of like offering this specific, like it can be kind of specific of like, what I see within you. This is, for example, what I see within you is like just this like incredible capacity to just like care for things and care for people, and it's like really inspiring to me, because like just that level of like care and tending. This is, for example, maybe they're an earth person, you just care so deeply about, that's like an example of like offering acknowledgement of like, you're seeing their essence, and you're saying that. And then if it's right, if you got the nail on the head in a way, and there's not just that there's one nail, there can be different things, there'll be like, wow, like they could start crying, because it's like, to be seen in that deep of a level and the gem of who you are, that's powerful stuff.
Oh, yeah, you have more refinement in your metal.
In my
Just-
metal.
Yeah, just right there. The confidence and the calmness that you.
Yeah, so metal is
created that.
very clear. We'll get to that, but yeah, metal is very clear. It's very clear and kind of like this thing, this thing that has a precision to it, this purification. And then we can also say, as a bonus, kind of like sacred space. Metal is a lot about space, kind of like sharing space, but not necessarily feeling like you need to talk. Silence is associated with water as well, but metal is about kind of like shared space, the kind of sacredness of the breath, sacredness of the moment. That's not what I think of it.
Like honoring the individual. So, right.
Yeah, it's a lot about honor. Yeah, honoring the present moment, honoring the individual, honoring, honoring society, honoring tradition. Metal is a lot about honoring all of these things. Awesome. Thank you for walking the circles with us. And that'll probably do it for the class. We'll wrap this. That will probably do it. I'll be here for a bit. If anyone has any questions or wants to chat more, we can talk. And thank you all for coming so much. And then, we don't have class next week. Yeah, let's do that.
And then also your Venmo.
Oh yeah, so like we do it like for the classes.
Do 4 more than do 8.
So the classes, it's like $25 for a class, or if you do like a multiple, it's 20 or something. But at this point, we have the 3 classes left. I have to look at the calendar. 100 bucks.
Right.
Piles right here.
Okay, so let me look at the calendar. You guys are free to go if you need to.
You're not
Don't-
detained.
And we don't even have to team. Okay, so yeah, next week we skip, and then we have the 3 remaining weeks of April. Next week is spring break,
I lost my.
and then we have April. We have all Thursdays, the 14th, 21st, and the 28th.
Kind of.
So we got fire.
I already lost my gun.
We have.
I miss water.
We have the recording actually.
Oh,
We
you
do have the
do?
recording. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm totally gonna listen to it.
Yeah.
That's what this is.
We weren't sure we were coming to, but
Yeah.
we're gonna meditate and stuff, but
Right.
all in, she took a little baby nap.
Nice. So we do
Yeah.
25
Absorb it.
per class, or 100 was it 100? Yeah, 100 for all 5. So, and again, if you weren't here last week and you want the recording, we have that. So just let me
I do
know.
want
Give me
that.
your email. Yeah. You can just write your email address
You've got my.
and I'll send
email.
it. Okay, cool. I have your email. Okay. And then,
Yeah, because I messed the water one.
and I can send you also the recording.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna end the recording here. My hair's a little messed up. Okay. I can. Oh gosh, I need to be more organized because
Yeah.
people are coming in and out and everything. Trying to just think of the best way to, actually have that. I'm gonna talk with Seth, but I'll definitely email you the recording. And